You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with Andy Grant. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but you don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel Show is produced weekly for your growth and enjoyment. Listen to us on podcast platforms including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and many more. You can also watch the show on YouTube by visiting realmenfeel.org/YouTube. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at realmenfeelorg and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Real Men Feel is brought to you by the Good Men Project. Visit goodmenproject.com for more of the conversations no one else is having. Your reviews, comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in our Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. And, my favorite sort of episodes for Real Men Feel are when I have a man join us and he talks about his own journey of personal growth and spiritual awakening, perhaps, and then goes into the way that he's sharing himself and being of service to the world from now on, from where he is today. And our guest this week, I think it really hits that sweet spot. So I want to introduce and welcome to the show, writer, martial artist, and MindBody Mastery Coach, Dane Dormio.
Hey there, Andy. Thank you for the welcome, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm psyched to have you here. You've, I've had plenty of guests and met plenty of guys that are martial artists that practice in some way, but I haven't come across anyone that kind of, you've used some terminology that I'm not familiar with, and you talked about that you're an internal martial artist, or that internal martial arts have really been part of your journey. So can we start? What do you mean by internal martial arts?
Sure, that's as good a place to start as any. And I guess I would say I consider myself an internal martial artist, but I think I can speak more broadly to something you mentioned, that I use terminology that you're not familiar with. I use terminology as tricky with what I do and with martial arts, I find, because martial arts is accurate. It's a term that I use, and of course people say, what kind of martial arts? And usually there's some kind of lineage or tradition that you are affiliated with, and what I have a very broad background in traditional martial arts. But what I do is in the arena, in the realm of martial arts, I teach a system called martial energetics, which while its influence has its roots in many traditional systems and styles, it is not itself a traditional style or lineage. It's a modern day synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern day scientific principles. So the main, I would say it is recognizable as an internal martial art for someone who's familiar with what that is. Not a traditional internal martial art, but an internal martial art in the sense that a very simple distinction that I make is external martial arts, which is what most people are familiar with. The emphasis is on jumping around and kicking high and backflips. In other words, calisthenics and physical fitness. And in internal martial arts, the focus is on sensitivity, internal awareness, and an internal bodily sensation. So the main martial arts that I have been influenced by, I've studied a lot of different martial arts, and the main ones that I've been influenced by are ones that nobody has heard of, almost nobody, Kung Fu Sansu and Bok Fu Pai, which are both they're both traditional Chinese family lineages, and they don't really have anything in common other than that, and the fact that the family lineage holder in both of these styles happened to, I mean, each one of the family lineage holders in these styles happened to live in San Diego in the last few decades, and I have lived there for a few decades. It's been my home base, and I learned from students of both of these guys. And um, Bak Fu Pai is an internal martial art. I just say Tai Chi. When people say, "What do you?" I say Tai Chi because it gets you in the ballpark of thinking it's gentle, it's slow moving. You know, most people think Tai Chi and they think old people in the park early in the morning in silk pajamas moving slowly in unison, and it's really not too far from that. It's not that, but it is kind of like that. That'll get you in the ballpark. Um, but Bak Fu Pai is just another internal martial art, and it's a Chinese family traditional family style. And internal martial arts, another way to characterize all internal martial arts is internal martial art is internal martial arts are qigong applied to martial arts, applied to self-defense and kung fu. So internal martial arts are all forms of qigong. And then the other traditional family lineage that I have largely been influenced by is Sansu, or often called Kung Fu Sansu, and it's not exactly an internal martial art. It's basically the progenitor of modern day reality-based self-defense. Um, and those are those are the two prime influences that are kind of the traditional influences in the system of martial energetics.
Cool. So, and when did you first get into martial arts? When did you meet these kind of local teachers?
Well, those are two different questions actually. But when I first got into martial arts, that's a great place to start because I was actually into martial arts since I was a kid. Uh, Basically, when I was 10, I was so into the Ninja Turtles.
So this was an internal martial arts at that point, then.
No. That's a good observation, actually. I was so into the Ninja Turtles. I basically wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. I still do want to be a Ninja Turtle, as a matter of fact.
It's good to have goals.
Exactly. When I was 10, my parents signed me up for Taekwondo lessons. Best Christmas present ever, and it was you know the local Taekwondo school, local ATA school, and I had signed up at 10, had a black belt at 12, had my second degree black belt at 14. It was that kind of a thing, and it started me on a path of learning and studying, and basically from then on, I was continuously studying or practicing some kind of martial art, and for the first 12 years, they were all external martial arts, as you observed. The emphasis being on calisthenics and physical fitness. And I actually tried Tai Chi once when I was in college, and I didn't have the patience for it. But it was after I graduated from college, and that was when I originally moved to San Diego for the first time to attend graduate school. And I guess there's some context that's relevant here. I grew up in the Bible Belt as a rational empirical atheist. In the Bible Belt in Arkansas, and I had no sense of spiritual awareness whatsoever. In college I majored in math and physics. I went to a liberal arts school, so you study a little bit of everything. And as my religion class, I took a class in Buddhism and learned about the philosophies and the ideas and stories, which I loved because I was into old stories like that, like the the Greek pantheon. I loved that as a kid, and I read the Panchatantra. There's a copy of that sitting around my house. So it was a lot of interesting stories, ideas, and one that didn't mean a lot to me, but it kind of stuck with me, at least in the back of my mind, was the story of the experience of Satori, which is the instantaneous awakening, where Prince Gautama sits under the Bodhi tree, and then Satori, the instantaneous awakening experience, happens, and then the Buddha, the awakened one, arises. And it didn't really mean anything to me at the time. It's an interesting story. But then when I went to graduate school in San Diego, and I started looking for new martial arts schools to go to, and I started going to a place that was called the Kung Fu Academy. And I thought, okay, cool, Kung Fu, some new martial arts. It turned out it taught internal martial arts, which if I'd known that, I probably wouldn't have gone. If it had said the Tai Chi Academy on the flyer, I probably would have just glanced, moved right on by. But it was based on internal principles, which means essentially awareness of internal sensation, body regulating and coordinating body, breath, and mind together. And I started just playing around with stuff, paying attention to what it felt like, experimenting with movement, with breath, with concentration. And there was a particular moment that I recall very clearly, where it was just another evening. I was in my room within about 6 months after I began practicing this way. I was in my room just moving, training, practicing one evening, and then all of a sudden there was like a light switch, and everything in the universe changed. Everything was different. And at the same time, everything was exactly the same. Nothing had changed. Nothing had actually changed except for my way of perceiving and experiencing reality and cognitively processing the stream of information. And the first thought I had was, that's what they were talking about. That's what that was. Oh, I know what that is. That's what that just happened. That Buddhism class I took, Satori. That's what they were talking about. And I hadn't thought about it, didn't know a lot about it, but basically I recognized right away that this profound spiritual experience that people spend decades in intense and rigorous pursuit and cultivation of had just fallen out of the sky and hit me on the head.
So saying that everything changed and nothing changed, what was different to make you notice that something had happened?
Well, everything and nothing, but I have a good metaphor for that. If you can do this right now, can you see your nose?
No.
Are you sure? Is it there in your peripheral vision?
Yeah. All right.
It's a kind of.
When I really try to see it, yeah, I can get a glimpse of it.
Oh, it's okay. So now you can see it, and now that you see it, it's been pointed out to you, and you notice it, and you realize, oh, it's actually been there all along.
Okay.
So it's different, and it's completely the same.
Okay. So it's more a change in your own awareness.
Yeah, so your mode of perceiving and processing information. And yes, and once you have seen it, you can't unsee it. I've learned, gone on to study and learn and read about this, and there's various things have been written down, and what's generally agreed upon is there's three components. There's the instantaneous awakening, which happens in an instant. There's the peak state, which is transient and can be anywhere from hours to weeks to months. In my case, it was 3 months, which is a pretty good run. It was like 3 months of like being in the movie Limitless, where you take the pill and it unlocks the action, everything else. It was like that for 3 months, but also at the same time being a complete baby, a complete infant, completely relearning everything about how to move and to breathe and to just be in my body and exist in the world. It was pretty trippy. And then eventually that goes away, but what remains and can never go away completely is the residual awareness, because once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. So that was one of the major transitions or shifts of my life that came about as a result of practicing internal martial arts. And I can't promise that that if you do it, I did what happened to you, happened to you. But
it's not in the brochure. At 6 months, you'll experience this flip of the switch.
Right. But what I have found through going on to study the principles of states and navigating the states and stages of unfolding spiritual awareness, and the principles of integrating and regulating body, breath, and mind together, that unlocked that awareness for me. I can confidently say that by studying these principles of mind-body mastery, one can navigate. These are tools that one can use to direct and steer and navigate towards the optimum experience of life. Whoever you are, wherever you are, these are the tools of self-regulation that provide the basis for an optimal experience of life.
Cool. That's very cool. So I have no experience with martial arts. So I always thought that any sort of practice there was always this very spiritual aspect to it. So, but you're saying, since starting your external martial arts at age 10, that did not come with any sort of spiritual experience. It didn't affect your awareness. There was nothing like that.
Not built in, and not like inherent in the practice. Not to say someone could not, you can use anything as a spiritual path if you're conscious about it.
Okay.
But they're physical tools. They're not spiritual tools. Speaking of traditional and external martial arts, generally, they're physical tools. They're great for getting in shape and great for lots of things. They're the same kinds of things that any kind of physical exercise and activity are good for, but they don't inherently convey the mind-body component.
Gotcha. Cool. So you've talked about you mentioned mind-body mastery, and I know that you are a mind-body mastery coach, and I believe you recently have a MindBody Mastery Academy now, correct?
Yeah, MindBody Mastery Academy is my coaching business, and there's a few things that I have online in the way of resources. We have an online learning community that has 12 hours and growing of instructional footage, and this is material that is designed not for people who are martial artists. If you are a martial artist, this will help to improve your martial arts. But this is material that's designed kind of as a human owner's manual, principles and practices that you can use to optimize your experience of life for anybody, regardless of who you are, or what you do, or what your situation is. If you are looking for tools to regulate and integrate your body, breath, and mind together and bring your entire being into congruence and unlock your potential in whatever area of life you want to. They're tools for optimal performance, optimal human performance in any area that are accessible and usable for anybody, regardless of whether you have a background in martial arts or not.
Cool. So it's not just a physical fitness sort of thing, and it's not just set some goals and achieve my business objectives. It's encompassing everything.
Yeah, there are components of both of those things, but I mean, the simple mission statement is your business depends on you. So it's about making uh, making your environment and your systems and optimizing your tool, which is your your mind body energy system.
So what sort of people do you work with most? Is it entrepreneurs, business people? Is it people from looking for, do they start thinking it's physical fitness, or how does that develop?
Well, I there's I'll tell you a little bit about my coaching journey, which I actually made the decision to pursue coaching as a career about 10 months ago. And this this work is based on two spiritual awakenings that I've had. One is one that I already described, and another one was one that happened around the same time, around 3 years later. And it was of a different but related nature. And then fast forward uh, 10 plus 13, 14 years, however long it's been. A lot of stuff's happening, but I'm developing these mind body mastery tools and using them to improve the state of my own existence and help people to improve theirs. And I made the conscious decision to pursue coaching as a career only about 10 months ago. And that's been a whole journey in and of itself, and has gone through stages, including being a sponge and trying to soak up everything and join every group and watch every webinar and read every book and essentially drink the ocean. And then I remembered the advice to listen to everyone's advice and then ignore all of it. Which essentially means take it in, let your massively distributed neural net process, integrate the information, and then make your decision and execute based on your accumulated awareness and wisdom and instinct. Mm-hmm. And what I got the real clear guidance at this time that I just need to get out there and help people, as many people as I can, however I can, whoever I can, ideally using the tools of mind body mastery that I've been developing. And having that realization and making that decision, a lot of things crystallized in my life around it, as I knew that they would, because there's two things that I've observed about the universe. One is that the universe rewards hard work of the right kind, but not necessarily in the ways that you would expect. And the other is that if you do anything over and over again enough times, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll be able to develop processes and systems. You'll be able to become more efficient and effective. And this was a key insight for me personally where I was, because I was, for a long time, I was in a kind of a paralysis by analysis state. I was trying to figure out who's my target market and my ideal client, my avatar, and how do I speak to their pain points and all of this stuff.
Yep, you've watched all the webinars. Yep, I can tell.
Yes, picked up on all the buzzwords. Was trying to define all this stuff, and I realized I just need to get out there and help people. And what I've realized is the people that I can help, they really don't conform to any kind of simple demographic. Mm-hmm. I could possibly identify. It's the psychographic is what is most significant, and I've found there's a certain process that I've developed for that it's an overview and analysis process that I've developed that helps people to gain insight into where they are in life, what's working and what's not working, and gain some inspiration about what they'd like to do right away to move towards, or move more rapidly towards, the optimal experience of life, and realizing their current goals and envisioning their next ones and that sort of thing.
So is that kind of the closest thing there is to, not a nature and ideal, but the kind of things that you enjoy helping people achieve the most, or the kind of people that are coming to you that just something's missing and they're not sure what, this kind of like vague improvement of life?
That is a great way to put it. Yes. And or maybe they have some idea what it is, but they're stuck. But yes, I very much enjoy it, and I love doing this work. And what I found is that this process is very helpful, and it's actually something I don't have to coach people at all. Just by going through the process and answering certain questions in a certain order, they tend to gain these insights and inspirations into their own life without me having to really give any input. But I found that people in all walks of life, from people who are highly functioning and um, and uh, and and have lots of achievements in their history, or people who are homeless and living in their car, are able to gain these benefits and inspirations as long as they're in a place in life where they're ready to grow and expand. That really is the main qualification. If you're in a place where you're ready to grow and expand, these are tools that are specifically designed for that purpose, that are specifically optimized for that purpose, and can be used by, I think anybody to achieve that kind of breakthrough.
Yeah. And I love that point, that and it's hard to define, but what you can't help, no one can help themselves until they're ready to help, right? And like I don't know about you, but I often have people come talk to me about hiring me as a coach for someone else. Like, oh, that person really needs your help, right? No, that's not really how it works,
Yeah.
So, and I know that you, I think it was fairly recently. You spent like 8 months in Nepal. Was that recently?
Yes, yeah, it was. It was actually coincidentally. It it, it was right about the time, right after I made that decision to pursue coaching as a career, was when I was invited to Nepal to teach martial arts to kids by a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting human trafficking. And I was there for as long as my tourist visa would last. I was there for 8 months. So I just got back into the U.S. about 10 weeks ago.
Wow.
And so
was it always your goal to stay there that long, or did that just keep extending your stay?
Well, I went there with an indefinite agenda, but I was ready to commit and to follow through and to follow spirit wherever it was leading me. And I worked with the children at a number of different schools and children's homes, and just with children that were that I would play with in just kind of like in a public setting. They're like basically where all the kids hang out in the park and start doing martial arts, and pretty soon one of them comes up and wants to see what I'm doing, then another one comes up, and it kind of
just a very organic, spontaneous sort of experience.
Yeah. And I was expecting it to be very rewarding work, and it was just I couldn't even imagine or convey just how rewarding I found it to be, and I just wanted to keep doing it, and for as long as I could, and In Nepal, the tourist visa lasts 5 months in the calendar year, and a volunteer visa, which is a form of work visa, is not a trivial matter to get, and they're so various circumstances lined up that it was the energy was moving in another direction, and I didn't really have any practical options for staying in the country. So I stayed as long as I could, and I loved every minute of it, and that was what I was doing alongside pursuing my coaching business for that whole 8 months. So it was something that I was doing in an environment in a third world country with basically no kind of social access the way that someone here could expect to have, and decent but somewhat unreliable internet access, and volunteering part-time, and no advertising capital budget or startup capital to speak of, and I just, working with what I had, the tools I had, and the situation I was in, was the most valuable experience I could have imagined for my coaching business, because it's made me believe that literally anybody, I think almost anybody at least, could be coaching, and probably just about everybody should, because something that I've come to embrace and adopt is that coaching moves humanity forward. Coaching is just human beings helping each other to self-actualize, and that's something that all of us have. We're all innate, born, natural teachers and healers. Is something that I believe, and I believe anybody who wants to or feels called to can and should just get out there and help people, even if it's just as a hobby, because we all have our genius zone. We all have our unique intuition and insights, and we all have our blind spots. So
cool.
Anybody can and should be coaching, and that is part of this conscious co-evolutionary journey that we're all on together.
So I love that. That's beautiful. So is that kind of one of the biggest insights you had from your time in Nepal? That realization that
was
coaching is helping?
It was up there. Yeah. It was definitely up there.
Cool. Awesome. And I also know that from our previous chat, I recall a big focus on achieving goals and organizational skills. Is that something that you stress and has helped you in your own experience? Or
well, so that's actually related to the second spiritual awakening that I mentioned, and that's it's the other component of MindBody Mastery Coaching. About 3 years after the first experience I described, I was living in Houston. I was working in the real estate business, and my colleague shared with me a copy of the audiobook version of GTD. Are you familiar with Getting Things Done?
No, I'm not.
Oh, awesome. So GTD, Getting Things Done, is the name of a book and a whole related body of work by a guy named David Allen. It's basically the modern day Bible of personal organization and productivity. And when I listened to this for the first time, it was like totally formatting my hard drive and formatting, defragging, and downloading and installing a new and upgraded operating system. It it fundamentally transformed my perception and experience of reality and my way of receiving and processing information.
Hmm.
And it also catalyzed a journey that I've been on ever since of studying and learning and teaching about the principles of personal organization and productivity is kind of the common mundane term. The term that I prefer is information and action management, i.e. the art of deciding what to do and then doing it. Technically, the most accurate term is executive functioning, which is the cognitive skills associated with independence and autonomy and agency, the ability to set and achieve goals, to control impulse, delay gratification, and work towards established objectives efficiently, to manage and handle information flow, and so there's two main foundational principles of the work that I do that are what I call energetic hygiene and informational hygiene. And energetic hygiene has to do with the mind-body practices of body regulation, breath regulation, mind regulation, and keeping your mind-body energy system in flow. And informational hygiene has to do with keeping your informational, your cognitive, conscious informational systems, your distributed cognition ecosystem in flow.
Cool. I love meeting people that have just new terms and just new spins, and that's because it just reminds me that there's so much more still out there, right? That I like that everything hasn't been named and discovered or experienced. But
I know. Well, when you really get right down to it and start fiddling with the details of anything, you start to find that the existing terminology just isn't fully adequate or sufficiently nuanced, or there's constantly new distinctions to create. And that was one thing that I loved about math, was it's like this infinite palace that's continually under construction, and there's an infinite amount of undiscovered territory waiting to be mapped out. So
cool.
Life is like that. I love it.
So what are the in your own personal experience or dealing with clients, people you've met around the world, what are some most common challenges to people setting goals?
Well, that's such a great question. I really think I need to refer back to an extremely prescient work written in, can't recall the specific year, but I'm pretty sure it was early 1950s. Alvin Toffler, Future Shock. Okay. And I could be wrong. I think he's still, no, he died. He just died in the last few years. He was alive and writing until very recently. It was one of the most prescient works ever. And basically, he said, well, folks, things are speeding up. And they're going to keep speeding up. And future shock was the term for when it's in relation to culture shock. When you're used to things being a certain way, and you go somewhere else where things are very different, you experience culture shock because things are so different, and there's certain symptoms and experiences associated with that, certain feelings and experiences. And when you experience culture shock, you can go back to where you came from, and things are the same, and it's all okay. But future shock is a state where, due to the acceleration of change, things everywhere in general have changed so much that you experience the symptoms of culture shock because things are just so different. but there's nowhere to go back to where things are still the same. And it's happening to everybody all at the same time, slowly and subtly at first, but ever accelerating.
Hmm.
And this process, as I said, this was an amazingly prescient work, and this is just the gist of it. It's amazingly prescient in many specifics and particulars. This process is happening, and it's you know, if you think it's bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, that's what's funny that was written in the 50s, which now we're like, oh, what a slow time and easygoing time the 50s was.
So it's amazingly prescient. It's amazing. But it wasn't, Bucky Fuller was envisioning similar things, and what starts as a trickle turns into a flood. It has to do with information. It has to do with information, and there's a theory at the heart of the work I do that I call the universal theory of information, and it's a physical theory. In certain ways, very much analogous to Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein came along and said, okay, listen up, folks, energy and mass are actually the same stuff, and they can be interchanged, and the two forms of the same underlying material. And the universal theory of information says energy and information are actually two forms of the same stuff. They're physically, there's a physical congruence, physical mathematical relationship between them. And you can't transmit one without transmitting the other. And a consciousness, a conscious being, is a flow of information. We're a flow of energy. A living being is a flow of energy. An organism is a flow of energy, and likewise in an ecosystem, there's a flow of energy through. And material comes in at a higher energy state, flows through, and leaves at a lower energy state, and the organism or the system extracts energy that it needs to function in the process. That's how biology works. It's a flow. It's an entropically increasing flow of energy. And it's a physics term. If you don't know what it means, it's not that important to get the gist of things. But it's a flow of energy from higher energy states to lower energy states. Consciousness is, in an analogous way, a flow of information from a lower entropy, from a higher entropy state to a lower entropy state. In other words, our consciousness automatically processes raw information and turns it into order. Just the same way biology processes food and turns it into energy. So as a conscious being, we are a flow of information. We're a system of information. And just like biologically, if the biological flows of energy are blocked, this is the whole foundational theory of traditional Chinese medicine, then illness will emerge in the organism. Right. Informationally, if the flow of information through our consciousness is blocked, then symptoms will manifest in the organism. And when I say symptoms, I don't think of ADD and HDAD as illnesses. I think of them as clusters of symptoms that are the precise symptoms that come about as a result of a condition I call entropy drag, or essentially where blocked or stagnant flows of information through the system. And this is something that, as the general overall flow of information through our civilization increases radically on a radical exponential curve, we're all experiencing the increased information input, flow of information through our lives. Information overload is a common term. It's universal. It is accelerating, and the requirement for all of us is to develop tools, cognitive tools, systems, processes, habits to adjust and adapt to this new high-speed, high-information environment. And that's the foundation of what I call informational hygiene.
Cool. So the pace of change is going to keep accelerating.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our internal, so what someone might learn and really work for them well 5 years ago isn't necessarily working well for them today.
In some sense, yeah, that is going to be true for everybody in at least some ways.
So or one of the best ways to navigate life is to really get used to and probably appreciate the rapid state of change.
Yeah, well, this ties back to the theme of Buddhism, because it's certainly not a new idea, a very old idea. The only constant is change. The nature of reality is change, and the definition of suffering in Buddhism is attachment to that which is impermanent.
Right.
There is a modern contribution to this that David Allen, the author of Getting Things Done that I mentioned, has articulated, and it also relates to the universal theory of information. And but the way David Allen puts it in Getting Things Done is that it requires energy to change or to maintain anything.
And I've often found it takes more energy sometimes to stay the same than it does to allow change.
Oh, if you think evolution is hard work, try standing in the way of it.
Right, yeah. Try to stop evolving. Yeah, that's more draining than then that's where kind of like the resistance comes in, and fear can make people try to hold on to what they've got harder and harder.
Yeah.
Change. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So what about achieving goals? So it's the constant rate of change and all this information, energy coming into us is making people kind of hesitant or challenged to set goals. What if somehow through this, tsunami of information, you've decided, oh, here's something I want to achieve, a goal I have. How can someone make that happen in the most efficient way possible?
Well, since you're asking about goals specifically, the most concise thing I think I can say about goals is that, and this broadens generally actually to thoughts. If a goal is a thought, and a belief is a thought that you have over and over again, which is Robert Anton Wilson's definition that I adopted. The value of a goal is in, and I've heard some, I've definitely heard some well-known self-development guru or gurus espouse this idea, but I can't think of any particulars off the top of my head. But if you, the value of a goal is in the present moment action that it fosters and inspires. And that's that philosophy that I apply to any thought. The value of a thought is in the present moment action or feeling that it fosters and inspires. And likewise for a belief is just a thought that you think over and over again. And the value of any belief is in the feeling and the action, the quality of life that it fosters and inspires. So the setting, I think of goals as like a target that you set for navigation purposes, like orienteering. You find a landmark, you line up to it, you follow your compass in that direction a certain distance, and then you recheck your orientation and set a new target that's in a distance. But it gives you the direction walking. It's just like the helm of a ship. So a goal is kind of like the horizon. It's always, it's always where it is. But here and now is where your life is happening.
So more the importance of enjoying the journey as opposed to only the destination.
Well, that and the present moment action towards the goal that the goal inspires. because you could just enjoy life without having a goal. But the value of a goal is in the present moment action that it inspires. And it's, in other words, it kind of relates to the principle that I observed earlier, that the universe rewards the right kind of hard work, but not necessarily in the ways that you expect. And I've found this to happen over and over again, that I set a goal of doing something. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it this way, and I work really hard at doing that, and I put in all this effort and dedication, and then that goal that I had set, either that happens or something even better happens in a completely unrelated way from the effort I was putting in. You know, so maybe there's something even better behind that goal that that hasn't come over the horizon yet.
Yeah.
It's
and I just find that this is one of the things of setting a goal. It helps and can get you inspired and get some motivation, inspiration going. But if you're attached only to that goal and a lot of specifics about it, you can miss everything else and the things that are better or work.
Right, and it's a whole art and a science, and there's lots of distinctions to be made. There's a lot to learn about doing it right. And here's something that I bet you've never heard before, something like this sort of thing, that relates to setting goals too. If there's the self-help cliche is live every day as if it was your last, And like, God, how depressing would that be? How inefficient would that be? I mean, if it was my last day, I'd spend it confiding with loved ones, and I wouldn't be making plans or setting big goals or.
Yeah, I'd wake up broke every next morning. I'd drain my bank account.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you couldn't possibly. And then I get it that, but the nugget there is live every day as if it could be your last, so you don't do anything that you would regret if you got hit by a bus in the next 15 minutes. That's right.
Right. Don't put everything that's important to you off to the next day because you don't know if you'll have it.
Yeah. I get it. But I like to say live every day as if you're going to live forever. Because if you're going to live forever, what would you start?
Yeah.
What would you invest in?
Right. That requires more planning. And
what would you look forward to? And also, if you're in a bad situation, hey, if you don't do something about it, it's going on forever.
Yeah. Right.
But I like to imagine the possibility of what I'm going to live forever, and what would I start today if I have forever to work towards it. I'm pretty sure you won't hear that meme floating around anywhere in the self-help world.
So you talked about and shared with us that you've had these two big spiritual awakenings, and I meet lots of people, men and women, that are kind of searching for that. So do you have any sort of advice for someone that I want that away? What steps do I take to have my to flip the switch to realize something else? They're waiting for I guess that they're waiting for some experience that proves they are spiritual, perhaps.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I know there are a lot of people that can relate to that. I think it's a condition as old as humanity, to be honest. In my experience, from what I can say, I think the fact that I was not seeking it and really had no consciousness of it whatsoever was a big factor in the reason why it happened to me, both times actually. And a quote that I read after this happened, it was in a book by someone who had a similar experience. And one of the aspects of the residual awareness was I could read the writing of certain people and tell that they had had the same experience, even whether it was writing about it or like reading Hermann Hesse. I could tell just by reading his novels. I could tell he had had the same type of experience. And there was a book called Spiritual Enlightenment: The Damnedest Thing by a guy named Jed McKenna that I was reading. He's written a few books about this, and he's the real deal, authentic. I could just tell by um, uh, there is a quote in the front of the very front of his book that said, supposedly the Buddha said, "There's absolutely no purpose whatsoever to pursuing spiritual enlightenment." And it was so perfect when I read that. It's so perfect. It's so true. Don't waste your time. That's kind of what I heard being like, don't waste your time, folks. It's really, it doesn't solve any of your problems. It does not solve any of your problems. The most immediate thing that happened for me, following upon the first of these experiences, was I dropped out of graduate school, moved to Houston to go into the real estate business with an old college buddy, ended up getting involved with a professional scam artist, accrued over $1 million worth of mortgage debt on over leveraged properties within 9 months. And let me just say, it was not by any means the end of my troubles. In many ways, it was just the beginning. So that's the first thing I would say to somebody who relates to what you're talking about, is pursuing it is probably not the best thing to do. Now, the other thing I would say is mind-body practices, and specifically these two paths I'm describing of energetic hygiene and informational hygiene. Personal organization and productivity is an enlightenment practice. It absolutely is an enlightenment practice, and it can be pursued as such, the same way that meditation or qigong or other things can be. And on the other hand, I'll say those things aren't a waste of time. Your mind-body practices are valuable. They're extremely valuable as performance optimization practices, as things to pursue for the sake of health, wellness, longevity, performance enhancement, and spiritual development. So there absolutely are valuable tools and communities and coaches. I mean, it's not something that happens in isolation. Generally, it happens in relationship with communities and with teachers. And it's also not something that happens as a big, orgasmic epiphany in all cases. It's something that happens as just an accrual of emerging awareness over time. And it might end up just being like your nose right in front of your face, and it was actually there all along. You just didn't, you noticed it, but you didn't notice that you noticed it. So there's, in fact, the mind body, in terms of mind body tools, this is what I teach. The coaching, the work that I do specializes in fact, both of these areas of mind body tools and personal organization and productivity tools. And the foundational mind-body practice that I recommend for everybody is qigong, which is it's a modality of traditional Chinese medicine. It's essentially breathwork, meditation, and exercise, typically gentle exercise, all rolled into a single activity. So that's what makes it so powerful as a healing modality, as a mind-body practice. It's something that I think virtually anybody can do. And it's the foundational mind-body practice that I recommend because it's the most complete and robust mind-body practice in its own right, and it's built upon the three regulations: body regulation, breath regulation, mind regulation, and the non-exertion principle and the pleasure principle. The three regulations are the foundation of any mind-body practice. So by studying and learning about the three regulations, you can have the greatest success and progress with whatever mind-body practice you prefer. And the three regulations, the non-exertion principle and the pleasure principle, are the keys to removing willpower as an obstacle or a limiting factor from doing or achieving anything. The non-exertion principle says, don't force, don't strain, don't overexert, don't try too hard. The pleasure principle says, do it so that it feels good. If it feels good, you're doing it right. If it doesn't feel good, you're doing it wrong. And these two principles can be applied to anything to conserve willpower, so you don't need it for so you don't need to expend your mental energy on willpower, and you can use it on making good decisions and using your cognitive faculties to their highest capacity.
Right. So you're not wasting all your time and effort exerting on something that doesn't feel good, but you're doing it because someone said you should.
That would be an excellent example, right? It comes down to flow state, which is a term from modern psychology. Qigong is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, flow state practice, and so it's not only the ideal foundation for any mind body practice you want to pursue. It's also the ideal in the original, if you will, for human performance optimization practice.
Cool. It's never. So I've studied positive psychology and flow states, and I have not heard of taking the ancient Chinese practices and that's a flow state. It's always been here. Yeah,
absolutely. And so if you're into flow states and that sort of thing, if you haven't looked into Tai Chi and Qigong, that's a really valuable field to look at through that lens.
Cool. Well, I really found this to be fascinating, and I love the combination and interplay between the information, the energetics, the regulation. You've got some great stuff going on, and thanks for sharing all your experiences. What's the best way for people to discover you and get in touch?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and I am first and foremost, I'm just happy for people to reach out to me directly on Facebook. I'm happy to connect, and there are a couple of pages that I have. I have content on Facebook and on YouTube at MindBody Mastery Academy and Chai Tea Tai Chi. And the online learning community that I mentioned is hosted on Patreon. It's also Chai Tea Tai Chi, and there's over 12 hours and growing of instructional content there, and there's also a lot of great content on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. So for content, those are the places to go. For contacting me about coaching or just to make friends, just reaching out to me through my Facebook profile is awesome.
Super. Awesome. So, and we'll put all those links in the show notes that you can find at realmenfeel.org, and also on the Good Men Project. And yeah, I want to thank you for your time, and again, sharing all of your experiences and all you're doing for, from the kids in Nepal to the lost people in San Diego or wherever you may be finding and helping people. And I just love when people experience their own awakening, their insights, their ahas, whatever you want to call it, and that's their motivation to then serve and help others. And you're doing that all over the place. So
it's certainly been a long and interesting journey, and I really am glad to have the opportunity to share. So thanks a lot, Andy.
Awesome. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon. And for more conversations that most men aren't having, visit the Good Men Project at goodmenproject.com. We're glad to hear from you anytime. Post a review or rating. Visit us at realmenfeel.org. Check us out on Facebook, and we'll talk to you again soon. Be well. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org or the Real Men Feel Facebook group and share what you thought of this episode. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Visit goodmenproject.com for more of the conversations no one else is having.